Hey, what's up everybody? How's it going? I've been wanting to make a video for a long time and life just got away from me. So please bear with me and don't abandon my channel. I really do plan on putting out more content. So I am going to continue on the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni coverage. However, this is still a true crime channel, so you will get that type of content from me in the future as well. But going forward, I've been trying to be pretty selective about what aspect of the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively case that I cover, only because, if you want to see, for example, you want someone to read court documents to you, for example, like, you can find that in many places. So, and I appreciate that, right? Like, I'm the type of person where I will go to channels like that because I want to get, like, I'd rather someone else reads it to me than I have to sift through all of it. Even though I do get the documents and look through them, it's nice to have kind of somebody else. You can do other things while you're listening to the documents being read to you. So anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is I was deciding, like, well, what do I want to talk about? Because I don't want to just regurgitate like what other people are talking about. And I had an experience where my husband and I were watching TV that kind of basically decided for me. And so, and what I want to talk about is Blake and Ryan's ability to essentially bribe other people in order to get them on their side, and how much power they have in the industry to be able to do that, and how I think they kind of just take it for granted, and it's something that they are accustomed to having, and they use this as part of their playbook and as part of how they operate on a regular basis. And what made me think about that, to start with, well, part of it is Blake getting the entire cast of It Ends With Us to flip against Justin, and how she was able to so easily do that. So I want to talk about that, but I want to specifically go through each actor and actress, or at least several of them. If I go through all of them, we'd be here all night, but just to go through several of them and talk about what Blake did and how she, like, really methodically turned people against Justin, and her kind of manipulative tactics. But something that I found interesting. So my husband and I were watching this show on Hulu called I think it's called High Priority. What is it called? Anyway, I guess it doesn't matter what it's called, but we're watching a show on Hulu, and it was a show, that I was not familiar with the main actress of the show. High Potential, that's what it's called. High Priority, High Potential. And I don't know if you guys do this, but a lot of times if I'm watching a show and I'm, like, not familiar with the actor or actress and I am curious about them, I might, go and look them up on, like, Wikipedia. So that's exactly what I did. So I'm looking up this actress just out of my own curiosity. I'm nosy. I want to know, like, how old are they? Do they have kids? Have they done other projects? And so I'm looking at this lady's page, the main actress in the show. She plays a character named Morgan. And for some reason, I saw that there was, like, a link to her husband's page on her Wikipedia page. And the link on her husband's page, I'm like, oh, well, he must be in the industry too. Otherwise, there wouldn't be, like, a link there. So I click on, how you go down the rabbit hole. And so I click on his page. And what do you know? Okay. What pops up on his page? It's a picture of her husband and Ryan Reynolds. Okay. So bear with me here. You've got this actress on this show. I go to her Wikipedia page. I click on her husband's page. And her husband's main picture on his page is a picture of him and Ryan Reynolds. So immediately I'm like, okay, this guy has some connection to Ryan Reynolds, clearly. So I'm like, okay, well, why is this main picture of him with Ryan Reynolds? Well, turns out he co-owns the Wrexham team. I think it's, like, in Wales, that Ryan Reynolds owns. The co-owner is the husband of this actress. Now, what's significant about that, when we talk about bribery and getting roles for people in Hollywood and how it's kind of like, they call it like a Little Big Town or something like that, where it's it's not people think of Hollywood as this huge place, but it's really actually, it's not that big in terms of like everybody kind of knows everybody else. It's almost like a cesspool. And the person who was guest starring on an episode of High Potential was Robin Lively. So I'm like, okay, clearly Ryan Reynolds got Robin Lively this guest starring role on this show. And the show is really popular and it's doing really well. So, of course, Ryan Reynolds is business partners with this woman's husband, or with the wife, or the husband of the main character, and then the main character has this connection to Ryan Reynolds, and so they get this job for Robin Lively. Now, Robin Lively is, she's 54 years old, and she's been an actress longer than Blake, but in terms of, like, popularity and significant roles, I think the most significant thing she did was this show called Teen Witch. She had like a recurring normal role. But then other than that, a lot of what she's done has just been kind of like guest starring on different shows. And I don't even know if you call her a guest star, because like, I don't know that people know who she is really, or at least not a lot of people, but just kind of shows where every episode might cover, for example, High Potential. They have a new case every episode because it's like a police drama. And so, they would just have her playing on one episode. And so my thoughts on that too with Robin Lively is, it's like, okay, I understand like Robin Lively is technically she's Blake's half sister, but it's like, I understand why she would support her sister, right? Like, you support family. I get that. But you have to wonder, like, does the fact that Robin is basically counting on and relying on Blake and Ryan to get her work, is that contributing to her loyalty to Blake? Because you have to wonder when, like, these people that are like her family or her close friends who start to see evidence that she's not telling the truth about Baldoni, because again, regardless of what you might hear on mainstream media, there has been objective proof in this case that Blake Lively is not telling the truth. There is descriptions of things that have happened, that Blake claims happened rather, on the set, and then there's video footage of these interactions that she's referring to that totally shows something different. And it proves that, in my mind, at least the way I look at it, objectively, like, that there's malice behind her claims. And so I can't imagine that someone like Robin Lively doesn't see this and isn't like, okay, like, she's clearly not being honest. But when that person is getting you money and has power and control over your career, you're probably not going to say anything to her about it, and you're probably going to stay loyal to her and feed her ego and continue to buy into her nonsense. And part of the problem with people like Blake and Ryan is that it's the nepotism, right? Like, Blake was born into a family of actors. She was handed roles that she didn't necessarily even have to audition for. She's been acting from a young age. She didn't have to worry about getting higher education. Like, she's been basically, I think, she's been a working actress since she was like 18, 19 years old. And on top of that, when you start to become famous, you have all these yes men and women around you. And I think what happened with Blake specifically is, I don't think there's ever been any accountability. She's never been held accountable for her actions. I can't think of one time where she's issued a public apology for anything she's ever said or done. And there's many examples of her, not being nice to journalists and things like that. And she just is she surrounds herself with people that tell her she can do no wrong. And that is extremely damaging to a person overall in their life. And we're starting to see why that's so damaging when it comes to Blake Lively. So what I really want to talk about is, because when you look at the situation on It Ends With Us, Blake was able to turn the cast against Justin relatively easily. And my concern with the upcoming trial, which I'm assuming is probably going to happen, but I know it's not for sure, but assuming it happens, my concern is Blake's team, the prosecution, the plaintiff, whatever you want to call them. I'm afraid that they're going to say, well, look, everybody went against Justin, meaning like the mass unfollowing on Instagram. And I feel like they're going to portray it as, well, you know, they would not have all gone against him unless there was he actually did something wrong. And, we know that Blake asked people to unfollow him. Like, Isabella Ferrer said that, and I believe Colleen Hoover said that. And I think, so it'll come out that she was the one behind it, but they're going to try to portray it like all these people hated Justin and they had no problem, unfollowing him. And if the jury is not keenly aware of how much influence and power and control that Ryan and Blake have over how easy it is for them to get a bunch of people to do what they want, to unfollow somebody, to not like somebody, to convince them that this person's done something wrong to them even though they haven't. The jury really has to understand that, or they might buy into the narrative that, well, he must have done something wrong if all these people are mad at him. And so I want to go through a few of these people. I can't go through all of them because we'd be here all night, and just talk a little bit about how Blake was so easily able to persuade these people to go against Justin. So I want to talk about, first, we'll start with Isabella Ferrer. Now, Isabella Ferrer, mind you, she was working as a waitress when It Ends With Us when she was doing auditions for that. She was literally, I believe, doing a shift at a restaurant when she was told she got the part. And so part of the reason she got the part was because of her uncanny, she looked like Blake Lively. And it wasn't, I'm not saying she's not a good actress, but it wasn't just her acting ability. It was the luck of the draw that she happened to look quite a bit like Blake Lively. Now, you have an up-and-coming actress who gets this really big opportunity when she gets offered the role, but we know that Isabella Ferrer had a really good experience with Justin Baldoni because she sent text messages to Justin telling him how great of an experience she had on her own accord right at the end of filming. And to me, that evidence has the most weight because it's closest in time to the actual filming of the movie, or the time of the movie. And she did not have a bad thing to say about him until after Blake got in her ear, which is extremely telling. But I think Blake's approach to Isabella Ferrer was bribery, as it is kind of everybody, but it wasn't, I don't know if it was as much future projects as it was giving her a taste of the celebrity lifestyle. She invited her to Book Bonanza because she wasn't originally invited, and she kind of took Justin Baldoni's place. And a lot of the trash talking of Justin Baldoni went on during Book Bonanza. So during that time, Blake is bankrolling that whole trip. They're flying on private planes. She's paying for hotel rooms and the most luxurious suites. There's pictures of Isabella Ferrer and Blake Lively in Blake's home in bed together. There are pictures of Isabella Ferrer wearing Blake's clothing. So she probably is just giving it to her, right? That's nothing to Blake Lively. So, of course, when Blake says, hey, I really need you to unfollow Justin, of course she's going to. it's a no-brainer. Does she really want to be, like, she's an up-and-coming actress this is her first role. Does she really want to get on, especially Ryan Reynolds' bad side by saying, no, I'm not going to do that? Like, to me, like, it's like makes me laugh out loud just to even ask the question, because of course she's not going to do it. Now, what Blake did with her, if you look at Isabella Ferrer's deposition, suddenly she's like, well, in hindsight, like, I had some interactions with Justin that I now see were inappropriate. Well, somebody else doesn't need to tell you that someone else is inappropriate or that someone else did you wrong. Like, if you didn't feel that way in the moment, likely the person did not do anything wrong. But Blake, like, you know, Isabella Ferrer starts talking about this incident. She's calling it an incident, which I don't think it was. That's the other thing, too, is when they refer to these, whatever they're claiming in the lawsuit that Justin did that was so bad, they refer to it as like an incident. And that makes it seem like, just even calling it an incident makes it seem like something bad happened of note. When in reality, like, they're just taking very mundane interactions and they're turning them into something, like they're taking them out of context and they're making them into something nefarious. And Blake is really great at doing this, unfortunately. Like, she's really good at this manipulative way of being. And what she does is Isabella Ferrer brings up, like, oh, there was a scene where, like, her and, because remember, she's playing young Lily, and there's a scene where she loses her virginity in high school, and apparently her and the young man that played her love interest in the film you know, they're teenagers in the film, but they're not teenagers in real life. She's 23 years old. That's important to note, because they try to make Justin out to be some kind of pervert based on the fact that they're portraying teenagers in the movie. But Justin knows that they're not teenagers in real life. And I think that's really important to emphasize. But on top of that, Blake has somehow got Isabella to think that the fact that Justin asked Isabella to lick cookie dough off of Atlas's or young Atlas's finger, that was inappropriate given the fact that the characters were teenagers. That was one of the incidents that Isabella brought up in her deposition. Now, to me, that has Blake written all over it. She takes mundane things that these people would have never thought twice about, and suddenly these are incidences. Even if you look at Blake in one of her filings or one of her amended complaints, she talked about how Jamie Heath said she would be birthed into the role of Lily, and how using the term birthed was sexist and basically calling that sexual harassment. And it's like, we all know the term birthed is just, it's a word for coming into something or, you know, transforming into something. It's nothing more than that. And the fact that is what they can come up with as their, you know, evidence is insane. The fact that her case is still ongoing, to me, is absolutely wacko, okay? So that was how she dealt with Isabella Ferrer. A lot of love bombing, a lot of giving her the celebrity experience, and then planting ideas in her head of like, well, you thought Justin was a good guy and you told him you had this great experience, but in reality, she found ways to implant these ideas of like, oh, well, remember, you told me that he had you lick, you know, cookie dough off his finger, and that's really sexual for two teenagers to be doing, and that means, you know, he's a pervert. And it's so ridiculous if you think about it, but unfortunately it becomes effective when you now have Isabella telling this in a deposition of acting like she came up with this on her own, when we all know that that's not true. This is coming from Blake. So The second person I want to talk about, well, I guess it'd be third because we already talked about Robin Lively. The third person I want to talk about is Liz Plank. Now, I found out some things about Liz Plank that I didn't know before, and I'm assuming a lot of you guys didn't know this before. Blake Lively already followed Liz Plank and had some connections to Liz Plank prior to ever meeting Justin Baldoni, prior to ever being on the set of It Ends With Us. And that's super important because I think a lot of people thought it was telling that she was so quick to jump ship. Like the day the New York Times article comes out, Liz Plank is quitting the podcast. She's totally, separated herself from Justin and Jamie, and it's very bizarre, right? Because you would think she's doing this podcast with this guy for years, that it would take more than just an accusation to get her to really abandon him. Well, what we find out, and I want to say this came from Blake's deposition. It definitely came from the legal records. Blake already followed Liz Plank on Instagram. Liz Plank had it was something besides the podcast. I don't know if it was a foundation or a project, but she had something that Blake followed on Instagram. And Blake already had a bit of a connection and a relationship to her prior to any of this. And that's super important because that can explain why Liz Plank's allegiance would be to Blake and Ryan, among many other reasons, I'm sure. But Blake and Ryan reached out to Liz very early on in all of this. And it almost seemed like Ryan was trying to kind of get a feel for if they were going to be able to flip Liz to their side. And what he did is he makes a comment, something along the lines of oh, I'm not quite sure what to think about Justin Baldoni or about this guy. We're kind of puzzled when it comes to him. And that opened the floodgates for Liz Plank to be oh, I thought that he had gotten better, but apparently not. And it opened the door for her to just talk crap about him. And I think a lot of this situation in getting all these people to go against Baldoni has been a mob mentality of you have one, it's kind of you get a group of high schoolers talking crap about one person, and suddenly you could make this person out to be the worst person in the world when maybe, they're just mildly flawed like the rest of us. And so, definitely think there was a mob mentality in this situation. But when it comes to Liz Plank, once they knew she would talk negatively about Baldoni, they knew that they had her. And one thing that's really interesting is part of their Blake and Ryan's strategy in getting people on their side was to offer them future roles or casting or connection. Ryan Reynolds has the production company called Maximum Effort, so they can say look, we will get you involved in projects that we're producing. And interestingly enough, and I wish I knew the name of what the documentary was, but Liz Plank does show up in a documentary that was produced by Maximum Effort. So Ryan Reynolds, they get her allegiance, and then they get her a part on a documentary, and suddenly they have her on their side. Now in court, her side is going to try to say, look, his Justin Baldoni's podcast host of several years just dumped him in a New York Minute because she already had bad experiences with him. And the thing about that characterization is it doesn't matter who you are, no one's perfect. You could go through a 3-year span of your relationship with somebody and you're going to be able to find things that you didn't like, right? I don't care if you have the best relationship in the world. If you're looking and nitpicking at somebody, you can find the bad if you really want to. So I just really hope that Justin's defense does a good enough job in saying, look, yeah, she jumped ship right away, but she was also given roles in a documentary. And this is a woman who, she's not an actress to my knowledge. She does more like editing and kind of behind the scenes type work in Hollywood. But she definitely is somebody who could benefit from having a relationship with Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. So it's a pretty easy choice when it's like you either go against Blake and Ryan and support Justin, and then you're at, whatever Blake and Ryan decide to do when you go against them, who the heck knows? Or you can dump Justin Baldoni like a hot potato and really suffer no consequences as a result, because he's not that type of person. And you can have all the benefits of maintaining and supporting someone like Blake and Ryan. So I do think Liz Plank, though, is really important that people know about that pre-existing relationship and about them getting her a part in on a documentary. Even if it was a small part, it's still giving her work and kind of promising her maybe more in the future. Excuse me. So then next, Brandon Sklenar, and his is pretty obvious, but I think Blake's approach to him was bribe him with future work. Because again, he had been in some movies and a TV show and stuff, but really the biggest role he's had, ironically, is now the one he was in The Housemaids recently. Paul Feig, who is like one of the only people on the planet that thinks Blake Lively is a good person and that supports her. He's a director, if you don't know. He directed Bridesmaids, I believe, and he directed another Simple Favor and A Simple Favor. And basically, he admits that Blake demanded that he hire Brandon Sklenar for a role, and that at the behest of Blake, that he had lunch with Brandon, and he said they hit it off, and then he was given the role for The Housemaids. Well, The Housemaids ended up being really successful, unfortunately, because I say that because I'm at the point now where I'm blacklisting any projects that any of these people do. But of course, I'm not most people, and I'm sure most people don't really care that much. But it, and I hate to say that because I like Amanda Seyfried and Sydney Sweeney's okay. But I just think the fact that he was given that role in exchange for his allegiance to Blake Lively. If it wasn't for that, he would not have gotten that role. And that's the MO, that's the bread and butter of what Blake and Ryan do, and they don't even think twice about it. So it might seem really strange, why would all these people just go against Justin Baldoni? There must be something there. And I can't tell you how many people on the other side I've heard make those types of comments, and that is, like I said, that's the one thing with the jury that scares me, is that they're not, because part of one of the questions they're going to ask jurors is their degree of familiarity with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, because they're not going to want super fans of the two of them on a jury, because that is completely improper. And so there are going to be questionnaires that screen to make sure that some kind of super fan, or of Justin Baldoni for that matter, don't end up on the jury, because a super fan of any of these people, of course, is not going to want to rule against them in the outcome of the trial for monetary damages. So that's my one concern. So anyway, but back to him, Brandon Sklenar was given this role. And I think if the defense attorneys are, if they can get that point across, look, We're not just talking about people individually on their own accord deciding, I don't like this guy, I had a bad experience with him, I'm going to unfollow him on Instagram, and that by coincidence they all had these bad experiences and they all unfollowed him. That is not what happened, okay? And is that everybody now? We got Brandon Sklenar, Isabella, Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover, it was a similar process Blake Lively had with her as she did with Isabella Ferrer. It was, I saw a text message where Ryan Reynolds offers her the keys to a cottage that they have in some nice place that she can just use at her leisure. And she even admitted to being starstruck by Blake Lively. Colleen Hoover was a fan of Blake Lively's prior to her even being cast in the movie. So it was very easy, again, for Colleen Hoover. And Colleen Hoover said in her deposition that that Blake Lively asked her to unfollow Justin Baldoni. So there's no question that is how things went down. Now, another part of Blake Lively's tactic, which I found to be so juvenile, but obviously it was effective. So there was some rumor online that wasn't true, but Blake Lively was probably reading things online, and she saw that there was a rumor that Colleen Hoover was Baha'i, which was why her and Justin initially got along so well. Well, Blake Lively sees this rumor online that Justin Baldoni had nothing to do with, right? Like somebody just made this up on their own, because Colleen Hoover is not Baha'i and Justin Baldoni is, and so is Jamie Heath. Because there is a religious aspect to all of this. There's some religious discrimination definitely going on here, but that's for a whole other video. But what part of Blake's process with Colleen Hoover is she told Colleen that Justin himself was spreading around that Colleen was Baha'i, which he did not do. That there's no evidence that Justin ever said that to anybody. But of course, Colleen, who I guess is like some kind of Christian, I think she's a Protestant, was really offended by it because she's apparently really religious, and she believed that Justin was telling people that, and it bothered her. And she, this gets brought up, and Isabella Ferrer was aware of it. So can you just imagine, talk about acting like a juvenile. I can just picture Blake Lively telling everyone at Book Bonanza, including Isabella Ferrer and Colleen, Justin's telling everybody that Colleen is Baha'i, and they're trying to make it seem like that everyone's and they kept referring to their religion as a cult. And just if you put this all together, you can easily see why the cast went against, or they all unfollowed Justin on Instagram. Because the fact of the matter is, Blake had to have known that people were going to figure out that everybody once followed Justin suddenly isn't following him anymore. It just takes one person to notice those connections have been removed, when it comes to Instagram, and suddenly there's all this speculation. And so again, this is Blake's making. She caused this, right? She asked all these people to unfollow him. That's what got the attention in the online chatter, that there was something going wrong and something going on with the cast. And in turn, it was, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. Like a snowball effect or a cascade. That was the word I was looking for. It was a cascade of one thing caused another thing, caused another thing. But the last thing I really quickly want to touch on is the fact that, again, like I said before, the case is ongoing, to me, is so insane when you look at Van Zandt. Now, I've covered Van Zandt extensively, but the channel Without a Crystal Ball just did a episode about this, and I found it to be really informative. But she talked about how them getting Jen Abel's phone, usually when you get a copy of someone's phone forensically, not only do you need a subpoena, you need a search warrant, okay? Even if they got this bogus subpoena and they're going to try to use that and say, oh, well, it was legitimate, which that in itself is BS. They went way above what a subpoena would have gotten them. And think about this. Like, there could be a criminal case where you have probable cause to believe somebody's committed a horrible crime, and you still need a search warrant with really strict parameters of what can be looked at on a phone. They don't just let investigators have full unfettered access to somebody's phone. It's, okay, the day in question was, May 12th. So you can look at text messages from May 11th through May 13th, and that's it. And then if you find something that's relevant there, we might expand what you're able to look at. But you're not just given this complete access to somebody's stuff. So, to me, not only should her case be thrown out based on the fact that the New York Times article and the case would have never been started to begin with if it wasn't for these stolen text messages, I'm also now on the side of, this is criminal and there needs to be criminal charges. And I just hope people spread the word. If you're not familiar with Van Zandt, I'm not going to get into it all here. I do have some previous videos on it that you can refer to. Otherwise, there's a lot of content creators that have covered it. So definitely check it out and familiarize yourself with Van Zandt, because it's a very important part of this case that Blake Lively doesn't want people to know about. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope I wasn't too all over the place. But basically my goal was to focus on how Blake Lively got the cast to go against Justin, and how that's just a normal part of Blake and Ryan's twisted world. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.